Hello everybody, all you fine people out there. I'm Bill Merchant, Deputy Director for Collections, Historian and Curator at the D&H Canal Historical Society. I'm also a board member here at the Century House Historical Society and head of their collections. I'm here today with the President and Vice President of the Century House, and we're going to talk about Rosendale cement and cement in the D&H Canal. And so that's why we're standing here. And it's a shame, you know, this wonderful board came back in March just before COVID, and we cleaned out the entire D&H slip. So what you can't see right here is the remains of I can take that from you now, I think, is the remains. Let's see if we can even, I gotta be careful because it'll lunch on me. So right down there, underneath all that undergrowth, back just before COVID hit, we got all of the board members, every one of them, which I think is really impressive, and a wonderful volunteer crew from SUNY New Paltz through Laurel Muty, our excellent secretary and a teacher of geology there. We cleared all this up, and here it is July, and you wouldn't even know it. But what was here was a loading slip. Jacob Lowe Snyder, back in 1825 when the D&H Canal came through here, made a deal with John Jervis, the chief engineer. He gave them some land. He had a mill over on the other side. You can't see it anymore. And he was a farmer, and he had a grist mill. And they put this loading slip in. As I say, you can't really see it. While they're digging the D&H Canal, a geologist hired by the D&H company discovered natural cement. I'm still trying to, there's two stories, both of them secondary sources. We do know for sure that it was by, the primary source on it is that in their first annual report, they tell you that a geologist, especially hired by the D&H company, discovered this dolomitic limestone that makes such excellent cement. Thank you, Mike. Yes, it is hot. I'm not dressed in my usual bow tie, but good to see you here. Before I go any further, actually, because it's always nice to have some people, why don't we just, here is Henry Lowengaard and Mike McCabe. Henry is the president here. Mike is the vice president. Mike's been doing some wonderful work on the carriages. We have a wonderful carriage collection. The final Snyder cement maker here was a aficionado and a fan of carriages, and we must have, how many carriages do we have, Mike?
We have 10 carriages and 3 slates.
And there's some really cool ones. Yeah. We've really got to get them out to the public. We're closed right now, so you can't come here. Henry, have we made any decision? We're still waiting, aren't we?
Waiting a little bit. It might open a little bit, but not the collections. It's a good question. We have to make some decisions, and a lot of that is actually not in our hands. It has to do with the whole state and what all the other parks are able to do and what other venues are able to do. But we might be able to have hiking on the property again and a little bit of stuff. I might bring a carriage out. I think if the carriages are out, they're not indoors, so they won't be as restricted as they would be indoors.
And you know, I always, when I talk about museums, we exist to preserve things like carriages that in this generation people will be scratching their head. It's something they see on TV. So it's nice that we take this material culture, preserve it, and interpret it. That's why we should have all the statues too. But we're not going to get into that today. What's that?
We may go and look at some of the statues.
We'll at least look at one statue on our way up. I've got to at least show that one, right? You know. So we had a loading slip here, and then they're digging the canal, and cement is discovered. There had been cement just discovered on the Erie. It's my surmise that that's why the D&H company had a geologist. Maybe this lightning will strike twice. It's really hard to see what went on here, but so originally they were loading flour, but by 1827-28, a man by the name of Lawrence, I'm forgetting his first name already. He had one of those second name, first names, Weston. And I tried to bone up and memorize all this. But anyway, Mr. Lawrence, there were like 4 companies that used his name just to confuse us even further. He got the rights from the Snyders to actually start mining this dolomitic limestone. And then eventually there was, again, you can't see any of it, there was a building over here on this end of the slip. And there was probably a good, well, this slip probably loaded cement from 1827 till 1917 or 1918 under various companies. The Snyders early on didn't actually actively engage in the cement business. That was later. We've got an excellent, I happen to, Dietrich Werner, a cement historian and the man that established the Century House, I found in our archives a wonderful description of the cement works and the cement history that he wrote that's been helpful for me to get a few more of my facts together. But gee, making natural cement, what is that all about, huh? Well, you get this certain kind of stone. It's a very specific limestone. It's kind of like nature's perfect recipe for making a cement. And the first thing you got to do is mine it out there. Lots of immigrant workers. Here we are, in fact, just while I'm here. That's the carriage barn that now houses our museum. And we're going to work to upgrade that. We're going through all the archives in this unintended off-season. There's a second carriage building. These are probably early 20th century, Henry?
This one's from 1904.
1904 for the...
Some, you know, fires and things. It's been rebuilt a little bit. And this is actually from the 50s, the place where the carriages are now.
That's because A.J. Snyder was making cement until 1970, and then I think he passes in 74, if I've got my... And he was like the last of the great cement men, wasn't he? And he was the guy that got the New York State to reinstate, I gotta get ahead of the story of cement here, natural cement's like superior stuff, but by the turn of the 20th century, people had figured out how to make Portland cement, which its main advantage was that it dried quicker. I've also read a thing, and I love this story, that Portland cement manufacturers got the ASME standards written in such a way that Portland was the preferred material. But A.J. Snyder discovers that if you add natural cement to Portland, it makes a better product. And he convinces the Thruway Authority to use it on the Thruway, both the surface, I think, certainly the bridges. But so you mine this stuff, and then you got to go and you got to burn it. You got to calcine it. And so what we've got right here is some of the cement kilns. The earliest kilns were pot kilns, but they were very inefficient. And Watson Lawrence, I knew my memory had kicked back in. Don't get old, people. Oops, too late. So this is a cement kiln right here. And so you would charge, let me see if I can keep us here. You would, they were built into the side of hills, and let's see if we can get up there. You would go and load the material on the top. After 1830, Watson Lawrence designed what was called the continuous draw kiln. And you would layer about 6 inches of the dolomitic limestone with about an inch of very small D&H anthracite coal, most often, in pea coal, exactly. Thank you, Henry. And you would burn it. And then the continuous draw kilns, you were just filling them on the top, and I forget how long a burn was. It was a couple of days, right? Or, you know, I don't have the exact timing, but you'd be then, you can see the remains of a wooden shed over here, because here you're making cement. You want to keep that out of the rain, or you're just going to be making rocks again. Kind of a full cycle, right? You know, you start with a rock and you wind up with a rock. But this is what these kilns look like. And the continuous draw kilns remain unchanged for like 70 years. So here we're seeing the interior of one of the kilns. There was a battery here of some 6 or 8, I'm going to say, right, guys? Let's see, you know, the overgrowth always makes this tough. But, oh, you can get a good look at it here. Let's see if we can... Here we've got the insides of a kiln. And if you look up there, unfortunately I don't have the ability to zoom, but if you look up in that corner, that's the fire brick. And I think they had to replace the fire brick every year, right? Every year. And yet they did it for up to 70 years. I think these kilns probably operated into the 20th century, in fact. So there's the remains of it. You can see it's a little dangerous now, but at least we've got, and you'll see these sorts of kilns all over Ulster County.
I liken it to going down to Appalachia and going through the woods down there and finding the moonshine still just about everywhere you turn. Back in the old days, it's kind of like that around here. When you drive the back roads, you find them all over between here and Kingston.
And everybody thinks they're lime kilns for lime. And they are lime kilns, but it's the dolomitic lime that made such wonderful, amazing cement. This industry grows because the D&H Canal is there, so they have a means of transport. This industry becomes so huge that I think they're close to 10 million barrels in their peak year of 1899. Just it's 9,858,000, I think was the number I was reading this morning as I was trying to get my numbers in place here.
The other trick was because it was right on the canal, that made the transportation of the product out to market that much cheaper. Plus they would recycle the barges. It would come in with coal and go out with cement. So it was extremely efficient. And it gave them an advantage over other places where there was also similar cements. it just, and the fact that it was like a direct line to New York and other major markets really helped it.
In fact, and we get way ahead of our story, but Samuel Kirkendall buys the entire D&H Canal bed for $10,000 in 1898 when the canal company finds it no longer serves their purposes, which is to say they're losing money now. But I contend that they were making money up until that last year because those guys were like, they knew their business, you know. And Kirkendall starts buying up all the cement plants. And so the D&H Canal lived on until at least 1917. I'm even thinking 18 now from the reading I'm doing. I'll get that final year at some point. All the secondary sources say in the 1900s, so they're all wrong. And it's because the canal lives on just as a cement plant. So coal gets moved in now, not from Pennsylvania anymore, but in from the Hudson, and the cement gets moved out. And it's the D&H Canal that really helped foster the Rosendale cement industry. By the second half of the 19th century, we always like to say more than half of all of North America's cement was the local Rosendale cement. Natural hydraulic cement. And the Century House here celebrates that story. I think we've got a wonderful story. I don't think there's another museum that talks just about the natural cement industry. And we're going to be even better. Because you can always be better. But there's a lot of other things we can look at here and talk about besides my car. It's a shame there was an awful lot that went on here, and I'm just still starting to wrap my brain around it. But this next little feature is kind of fun. You'll have to, if you're in the area when we finally do open, you have to come. It's the grounds are generally open to the public. You can hike, and you can go to a. Oh, maybe I don't want to say yet. Maybe I'll save that little you know. What's he talking about? Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to go over here. I suppose it's actually while I'm going over here. Let's just stop here for a minute, because you can see some of the excellent signage. We just got these signs, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they look nice. Well done. It gives you an idea what the site is like. Don't be shy if you've got questions. One of the three of us ought to be able to answer them. But what you got right here, and this is really typical all along the canal, because what we have is this little stream right here. Once again, I got to be really careful. I'm going to try not to have the feed drop out on us. We've had our share of technical difficulties, you know, like any new endeavor. But what you're looking at here is the Tannhouse Brook. Now, granted, it's clearly, you can see all this stonework, probably from the canal era, because the Tannhouse Brook served the D&H Canal. It was a feeder. You know, when you got a 108-mile-long canalway, you need a lot of water, right? They had over 25 reservoirs, but really anytime, even a little body of water like this came in, a lot of these, we could tell from the historic maps, a lot of these would simply... Sorry about that. See, I just cannot touch my phone. Someday we're going to get some better tech so that I don't... Yeah, someday. But here, since we were talking about statues, here's a fun little statue coming up. It's really wonderful. Is this gazebo date from AJ's time?
No.
Last year.
Oh, see? Hey, I was on the board by then. Why didn't anybody tell? Wait a minute, I must have missed that. I love the gear. Wow, look at that.
Yeah, the gear was here. Yeah. The gear was sitting on the ground for a long time. I don't know where it was or whether Dietrich found it and just dragged it here. But
it's the kind of our founders gazebo.
That's right. It's in honor of the founders of the Century House.
Which would be Dietrich Werner and Gail Grunwald. The late Dietrich Werner and Gail, who's, God bless her, still with us. But you know, there's a real controversy these days regarding statues. I don't know, people. Should we take this one down? Hard to say, right? Anybody out there have an opinion? I don't think it's celebrating slavery, that's for sure. And you know, this brings up an unfortunate thing about the D&H Canal. Probably a lot of sewage went into it. And I always love to tell the story, too, that you could be fined $10 for dumping an animal carcass into the canal. And $5 went to the guy who snitched on you. I see a career, you know. How do you make your living? Well, I'm a carcass snitch, see? And I just, you know, they give me $5 every time. $5 would have been a week's wages, a good week's wages. 50 cents to $1 a day was a prevailing wage throughout the 19th century. I'm amazed as I read, even in the late 19th century, $1.25 a day is still considered a decent decent pay. I haven't tried to figure out what that actually is in today's money, but there was so.
Measure it in hamburgers.
You know, as I was coming here on this hot, it's got to be 90 at this point, right, guys? I was wondering why nobody swims in this little pond that they made. And this was probably made for a mill at one point, although the main mill was on the other side. But I know there were a lot of, from reading of the historic designation report. But then I took a close look at it, and I'm sorry, but I don't think I want to go in there, guys. But it's a beautiful site. What kind of fish are they? Do we know? They aren't the jumping ones. Those are the invasive. Those are horrible. That's a Chinese. And this is nothing against the Chinese people. I want to say, I want to say right now, but that's a horrible species.
These are just like vertical. It wasn't like you see on the come out in Illinois and whatnot where they're jumping across those. These are just like jumping straight up for.
But I don't think carp do that normally. I think it's only that Chinese carp that does it. But I'm not that. Maybe somebody out there knows about that.
Someday it would be nice to dredge this thing and see what we can find buried in it, because being a body of water, and as you said, bodies of water were oftentimes disposal areas. I'm sure we could find a few whiskey bottles or whatnot buried in here somewhere.
Irish whiskey too, people, because a lot of the people that did this labor were Irishmen, weren't they? The only ones that could do this kind of labor. And imagine the labor force you had to have, besides the mining, which we might talk about a little more up as we get close to the mine, but you also needed coopers. And coopers were so important in early American history. Coopering technically is making round wooden boxes. And so coopers made everything, in early American history, no ship of discovery sailed without a cooper to build barrels for whatever it is they found that they wanted to bring back. And every community needed a cooper or two, because they made your milk buckets, they made your wash tubs, they made your sap buckets, they made firkins for your butter, they made vessels for packing all sorts of food in, they made barrels for your wine, your cider, your beer, and for your cement. And so every cooperage, I know that the Whiteport at one point was making 1,000 barrels of cement a day and 800 barrels, or vice versa. And they get to, by the latter part of the 19th century, there is it something fun? Something we need to show anybody? Or? Oh, there he goes, yeah. I don't know if we can see that easily here, but pond life here, huh?
Yeah, so we got life in there, that's good.
So it can't be that bad. Maybe I do want to swim in there before the day's out, huh? Probably these chunks of stone are by and large that dolomitic limestone, right? I want to get a piece of that for my museum, because we're going to talk about it with a shout out to us. Now there used to be a pig barn, right? And at one point, this is a garage now, but I wonder if it was built on the site of the pig barn earlier, maybe?
As the cement industry collapsed, it's really what happened at the beginning of the 20th century. Even this property couldn't make cement anymore, so it went back to being a farm for a few years until there was some opportunity that made it cementable again. So it went back and forth from farm to cement, and I don't know if it was a livestock kind of farm, a horse farm, and certainly there's...
Well, we know that AJ loved his horses.
Farm it was.
Yeah.
But it was AJ, after all, at that point. After, what, 1911 or whatever. I can't remember when he took it over.
I think that's the year.
He was like 21 years old or something. He snuck his way in, but that's a whole other story.
You start to dig into history, people, and there's tons of fascinating stories, right? There's just really, there's some signs of...
laundry, too.
Oh, always, yes. Those stories. But now I'm just curious over here, since we're here.
I took those rocks from this retaining wall that are over there.
I mean, this is definitely this stone here. This is obviously man-made, but it looks like they also cut it into the side of this hill to have a flat spot to put this building and stuff, right? So.
Don't go in there.
Oh, I'm not going in there. I'd like to see us save the other building, though. Plenty to do. Send money, people. Hey, do we have a donate key on our website? We need to.
There's one there. It's
there is.
Under lots of disclaimers at this point. But...
Well, we're trying to make sure that we're good community members. So as we walk along here, Every time I come here, I learn a little more about what was going on here. There's still plenty to learn, though. It's hard when it gets overgrown to make up exactly what was what. There was so much activity throughout the 200 years that this is an industrial site that, you know, as natural as it looks now, it's highly likely that a lot of what we're looking at was really done by man. But on the other hand, you see a tree that size, and you got to figure that's been there a while.
Yeah, you do see a lot of new growth around, but there are some big ones out there.
Yeah, you mean the new growth around that beautiful slip that we cleaned up? You could see it back. We should have shot this video back then, see? Oh well. We're going to have to figure out how to get a handle on that.
Well, all these trees here, these were not here. They're all less than 50 years old. So.
You know, most of us in the eastern seaboard, we're not seeing any first growth. It's very rare. We're largely seeing 20th century growth. I remember years ago driving through Westchester, seeing all those stone fences in the woods going, why did those farmers go and put, oh, wait a minute, look at the size of the trees. All of it was clear. Those stone fences you might run into out in the woods were put there when those were farmers' fields, and those were the stones they dig up every spring because the frost heave would pull up more and more stones every year. Just must have gotten tiresome after a while. So here we are at what will be the final stop on today's tour. The Widow Jane Mine. So this is a portion where cement was mined. And this is great because you can talk about the kind of mining, because this area all in front of us here was an open pit mine. You would always you'd hit that rock and you just start to pull out all the easy to find, the low-hanging fruit they call it, right? Yep. I'm sure, I don't know what this pile of dirt is, but that's not some natural formation. That's somebody made that for some reason. Reasons long forgotten, but still, once you got there, you know, it was so successful. There were so many, well, as I said, over, what was it, close to 10 million tons at its peak in 1899. Just a phenomenal amount. So you started to have to go into the side of the mountain, and that's where we get. So you have an open pit mine here. And then what we've got here is the entrance. Thank goodness, this is why I stopped. This was our last stop because I knew the temperature had dropped at least 5 degrees, if not more here. So, what we have here, I'm hoping that the light will be okay. We'll see how good my cheap Samsung phone is. Maybe the Canal Society will buy me a better phone for this, right? Yeah, there's an idea. But what you go in, now you start to get what we call a room and pillar mine. And there's the pillar, and that's that dolomitic limestone. It's in different layers. This is the lower layer. Is that the High Falls layer or the Whiteport layer? I think the lower layer is High Falls, the upper layer is Whiteport, or is it vice versa? Things I have to memorize someday, right? But I'm going to see if we can go into the mine and see how the light is. This is a phenomenal, we have an awful lot to, the society, in better times, we have a lot of performances and stuff. It's a great space. There you go. Yeah, this is beautiful. This is, just look at this. Every time I'm in here, and you think that every bit of this rock was mined out, taken laboriously to the top of a kiln, fired just the right amount until it was calcined, and then ground in a mill. But this is a room and pillar mine, and my camera's doing a good job of letting you all see what's actually here. Just a phenomenal amount of material that they would have mined out. And there were different, I forget the number of limestone layers, but there were a bunch of them. Some of you may know that I had a career as a double bass luthier, and I had the privilege, can't really see in here, I had the privilege, this is all filled with water, a mile, pump out all of the water to be able to work the mine. But this goes at least a mile this way. And we've got some divers that are going to go explore it and shoot some video someday. But as I started to say, back in 1996, right after I moved here, I was lucky enough to open for John Sebastian at a fundraiser for the great Maurice Hinchey in this site, playing upright bass with Las Vegas, local character. Out there anywhere? So you look here. And so when the cement industry goes out of business in the turn of the 20th century, a lot of these mines got repurposed for mushrooms. And in fact, this particular mine became a mushroom growing site, as did the old beach mine that's now Iron Mountain's storage facility. old. Let's see if we can go over there. I could spend a lot of time in there. I don't know if they can hear me with all the echo, but it's a wonderful performance space. We had a great. What was the name of the troupe that did their was here last year, Henry?
All the troops were here last year. We had.
Oh, the actors I was thinking of.
That was the D&H Theater. They came in and did their version of Macbeth, which is sort of like an Eastern European version of it. And every actor knows the whole script, and for every scene, they all changed roles. And the whole thing was lit with flashlights that the non-role-playing actors were holding here in the dark in the mine. It was completely stunning and spectacular. It's
just a great space, and it's wonderful to be able to let the community and let musicians. We're talking about trying to do some live stream stuff out of here. Maybe we haven't finalized our plans. Boy, everything you look at here is just so beautiful. What I started to say, though, is these cement block, as I understand it, dates from when they were growing mushrooms here. And that they closed it all off. They would, your mushrooms like to grow in the dark, you know?
Well, if they had the pumps going, there was probably plenty of room for mushrooms.
Well, if this goes a mile in, you know, and you just look at, so imagine the volume of material and the amount of labor.
And this is just one of the mines, and probably not the largest.
Right? I wonder, we have a count of how many mines there were on, even in the Rosendale Historic District? I know Dietrich had it somewhere. I didn't memorize that.
I have to find it somewhere.
Yeah.
I know some of them, but then there's some on private property that I don't know about. So.
I know there's one is it Pond Hockey, maybe, where it's on private property, but you can see the entrance to it. I'm always tempted to trespass. Don't tell anybody. Oh, wait.
Well, the one in Pond Hockey, the one that comes down Delaware Avenue was the Knaus mine, where they did a lot of mushrooms. Okay,
yeah, because it was the Knauses that did the mushrooms here, too, I think, right?
They did the whole thing. They came up with the idea, and then they enlisted all the mines, which by then, this was in the 30s, so by then all these places were just gathering dust and filling up with water. And they said, oh, it's cool, it's dark, perfect for mushrooms. They had like a continuous year-long stuff because this is like climate control.
Yeah.
And in fact, they built a special kind of air conditioner in that particular mine over near Delaware Avenue that was really innovative at the time, using kind of geothermal properties of the mine to do the air conditioning in there, keep it from getting, I guess, too moist. But yeah, and they did that for many, many years until I hear two stories. One is that there was a virus that knocked a lot of the mushroom industry out here.
Sound familiar?
Sound familiar? Or the other was just competition, which was what killed off the cement industry. So, and then, you know, what was the next thing? The next thing was record storage and atomic sheltering, which is what Iron Mountain is doing up the road from us.
Yeah, so all the rich swells, that 1%, we're going to be safe when somebody dropped the bomb because of cement mining. You and I were still going to be what's a nice way to put it? Oh, forget it. I can't think of one that's not obscene. So
we'll still send those. The idea was to still send your gas bill out when there wasn't a house.
Yep.
But you know, that perfect temperature year round. You know, I know that everybody knows that here in Rosendale, and that's the opening of the Lawrenceville mine, I believe. Or Lawrence mine. Again, there were so many companies, or 4 companies that used his name, and he was involved in to some degree or other in all of them, I think, but not initially. You know, it's a complicated story. I'm still wrapping my brain around. Suffice it to say.
A lot of mergers and acquisitions.
That's also you know, relevant today too, isn't it? You know. But think about it. This whole open area here was probably a continuation. Let's see. Of this all the way down. All this was dug out first, and then they made their way there. And then they were so successful that they worked a mile into the earth. That's fascinating, you know. And it's so tied into the D&H Canal, having been discovered because the canal came through, having been exploited because the canal was there to supply the transportation. And in fact, it was responsible then for the canal lasting into the 20th century when the coal traffic was finally all put up on the railroads. It's really amazing. We might as well, I was going to stop here, but there's one more fun thing. I thought we'll just go over, just to give you a sense of, I don't think I can go over this way, although we might as well go look at that little scum pond there. This gives you an idea, too, that they would have pumped out the water. You can see the gates over here. Let's see if, yeah, that's all underwater, but when it was pumped out, it It wouldn't. Hey, have the divers said anything about any sort of fish, or I wonder if there's anything living in this water. This is part of an aquifer too that the Turco brothers used, and that's the Widow Jane Whiskey Company. We might as well give them a shout out, right? They're being good to us. The Widow Jane Whiskey Company uses this wonderful local water to make their product. But I thought there was one more little fun thing, yeah. Since I'm here and enjoying myself, I could just go on and on, people. What can I say? It's really, when we're finally open, if you're in the area, it's well worth coming by. We don't have as many trails as I'd like us to have, but it's really great to hike and see and think about what it must have been like back in the day. We've got some trails. I know that there's a cemetery. I don't think any of the locals. There's probably AJ's horses and his dogs. He loved Dalmatians. Dalmatians, the animal that you always think about with fire companies, but apparently carriage companies as well. I'm really just going this way because it's so much cooler here. The outflow from the mines gives you a sense of how big these mines are over here still. This is all part of the Widow Jane mine, right in here. As I say, to my knowledge, the only publicly accessible extant cement mine. But there's been so much activity that here we have a boiler. Probably this is an early 20th century. Detroit, John, oh, is this? I was going to thought John Deere, but no, it's John somebody else. Oh, I can't, that's so rusted we can't. Hey, Henry, do we know what this boiler was used for?
I think that was running the pump.
Ah, there you go. It was the steam boiler to run the motor that would then pump out the water. That makes sense. It's right in the right spot for it.
Over there was like the pump, the foundation. It would be great. You know, people didn't want, it's like, I say from other historical perspectives, nobody takes a picture of the back of the house where the servants' quarters were, which is how or in the stables, right?
Yeah.
Put the stuff that actually make the house run, as opposed to the front, which is where all the, the silverware was. So it's hard to get a good visual appreciation of what the infrastructure was that runs this place.
Well, it's
there
always
might be some articles that talk about technical things that have just come in when they were new, and they say, oh, here we are on site at such and such a place, and here's this cool new machine that's going to make it 50% more efficient to crush this rock or whatever. There's a lot of that stuff in advertising, but a lot of that is just like line work or drawings or something, and not so much a photograph of where it was in place in actual, as it was working.
in a certain way too, the steam engine was really important. It sort of bridged the gap between water power and until regular electricity. It was a real 19th century innovation, really 18th century they start, but it really picked up steam. Yes, I meant that. I did mean that. In the 19th century, when you get the steamboats of Fulton's, and so here this is also an artifact that at some point people need to have that interpreted. They won't understand how steam power was so important. Prior to petroleum, for instance, steam locomotives was wood and coal, and they don't really start doing diesel engines until petroleum takes over.
Well, even the Sturbridge line at the head of the canal.
Yeah.
Back in the day, used once, but hey, there it was.
Well, and I just think it's fascinating that this company runs the first steam locomotive in the Western Hemisphere. As they're opening their canal, only to have the steam engine basically eventually take it over. But there were 70 good years in there. Yeah. That they made use of, Well, we hope that you will join us. Next week I'm going to be, if anybody go over and like the Ulster County Historical Society's page, because I I need to stop it. Well, you can press the finish button. So next week at 2 o'clock I'm going to be live from the Ulster County Historical Society, where I'm going to do a tour of their historic tool room, which I curated with the excellent Leslie Lefevre Stratton. And then the week after, I'll be back live for the D&H. The week after that, back for Ulster County. And I think Mike and I are going to probably do a little something on the Century House page about the carriages, possibly in the next month. We'll talk about that when we finish. But I want to thank you all for being here, and Send in those questions. Tell me what you want to hear about. Thank you so much.